Well, today we're starting a law class, so we're going to be talking about the most basic of questions for this class, and that is, what is law? Um, I think I was out of law school before I really can say I understood the answer to this question well. It's one of those things we grow up with. We think we understand it. We hear the word all the time. But in reality, we probably don't have that um, great of a handle on the meaning of the word law. So when I've talked to classes in the past, students usually come up with the idea of rules, and definitely law has to do with rules, but not all rules are law. So let me give you an example. If I were an NBA player and I violated a rule of conduct, the NBA would come in and say I violated the rules, and therefore they're going to suspend me for so many games or something like that. Um, but the question would be, well, okay, there are rules, I suffered a penalty for it. Does that mean that those rules are law? And the answer would be no. The NBA has a contract, and under the contract, maybe it can employ law to help enforce its rules, but the rules themselves are not law. Likewise, if I play a game of baseball and there's a rule that says 3 strikes and you're out, and I have 3 strikes, I'm out, but that's not a law. So what else do we need to make a rule a law? The second thing that's required is government enforcement. Okay, and I'll explain that in just a second. But if you have these two things, rules that are enforced by a government, then we have law. Okay, so that just takes us to the next question. And that next question is, um, what is a government? Okay. Again, a word we hear all the time, but we probably don't really understand what a government is. There are lots of things we call governments around the world. We have the government of the United States. We have state governments within our country. Different countries have governments, the government of Japan, the government of China. And there are some things that we call governments that maybe really don't live up to the hype. For example, the government of Somalia or the government of Afghanistan. Um, and so why the distinction? Why do those seem like maybe they're not governments in the same sense of, say, the government of Japan or the government of the United States? And that is because to be a government functionally, to really have the what a government needs, it must have a monopoly on the use of violence. When I say that, I mean over a specific geographic area. So there's no question that the United States military can control the use of violence within the borders of the United States. When I mean, a monopoly or control, I mean they really dominate in that area. Not that nobody ever uses violence, but push come to shove, the government of the United States could dominate over any other entity within the borders of the United States. And likewise, the government of Japan could do that. But there are governments or things that we call governments that really can't. So take an example of Afghanistan. Despite years and years of war and trying to build up the military in Afghanistan, outside of Kabul and without the efforts or the assistance of other countries, the government of Afghanistan really does not have the capability of controlling its own territory. So while we call it a government or we use the word government, it doesn't really fit the functional definition. So you have areas of Afghanistan that are, for all practical purposes, lawless, at least as far as the government of Afghanistan goes. There may be other local entities that really fill the void and, in essence, control the use of violence and are thus able to impose their own rules. Other examples would be southern Lebanon, where what we call the government of Lebanon doesn't really control the area. Hezbollah is the entity that really is able to control the use of violence in southern Lebanon. And it functions much more like a government. It imposes its rules on that territory. So if you have rules and those rules are enforced by an entity that we call a government that fits the functional definition of government, then you have law.